In the past, when you would do a migration, even a quick migration in the first release of 2008, you would only be able to do that migration if you were moving it from the exact same processor architecture, right, which really limited your ability. It was good if all your servers were the exact same model and make. Otherwise, it was probably not going to work. With processor compatibility mode, you can move across different CPU versions within the same family, within the same overall architecture. So you can go Intel to Intel or AMD to AMD. You can't go across architectures, but you can go within it. And what will happen is the processor compatibility mode will only expose those features of the CPU that are common across the whole family, rather than that are specific to just that advanced model. So you do give up a little bit in the advanced processing capability, but what you preserve is the ability to port across multiple platforms. All right. On the power management side, we've added something called core parking. It's pretty common these days. In fact, I think it's the norm by now that your processors are going to have multiple cores. And so your processing load can be distributed across those individual cores. That's fine. That's more efficient, or it's more powerful, let's say. But when all those cores are running, you're also using more power. So one of the things you can do is if you determine by doing some performance monitoring that one core could process all of those tasks, all of those threads running at full utilization, you can park the others. That's one way to manage your power consumption. Another way is through what we call P-states. P-states, instead of parking individual cores, what you're doing is you are controlling the frequency or clock speed of the individual cores. And what you can do is determine that instead of running, in this case we have a 2.8 gigahertz dual core processor, you could take either core or both and say, you know what, I could get perfectly acceptable performance, maybe even the same performance because of the type of application I'm running, by increasing the P-state to, say, 3, which reduces the frequency that the processor is running to 75% of its maximum capability. And what that will also do is reduce the power consumption. Again, that's configurable. And we've also added centralized storage capabilities so that you can have one storage area network with one namespace available to all of your nodes in your virtual infrastructure. Okay. On the remote desktop services side, by the way, we did a name change on this. Some of you may know this. This used to be terminal services. So what we used to call Windows Terminal Services is now remote desktop services. The remote desktop services side of things, we have greatly improved the user experience specifically. That's where I've noticed the biggest change. All right, so how many of you have been using terminal services in the past? Quite a number of you. Okay, right? So you understand the basic concept. You've got applications run one place but controlled and presented somewhere else on your desktop. The challenge in doing that is because the application is run somewhere else completely, it makes things like multimedia, voice over IP, that kind of stuff challenging, right? Because it's using all the hardware of the remote machine. Well, with R2, we start to redirect some of that. So if you're doing, for example, multimedia, instead of doing it all on the remote machine and then piping it down to you, it actually redirects and uses your hardware at the local machine. So you get full multimedia support, you can get multi-monitor support, you can get the full Aero interface, you can do voice over IP, you can do all that stuff, and it's intelligent enough to know when it shouldn't be doing remote processing, when it should be doing it all locally. We also have a connection broker that we've introduced into R2, which will allow you to do things like load balance user connections or set policies that will enable you to control which servers will respond to which clients. We've improved the management tool set. We've made a number of enhancements. We've also improved a lot of the administrative and management consoles as well. I'm not going to go through all of them because there have been lots of changes, especially for those of you who are still on 2003. But for those of you who are on 2008 and moving up to R2, I think two of my favorites anyway, one definitely is the Active Directory Administrative Center, for sure. There we've actually taken tasks that you used to have to go to several different places to do, and then we put them in one place, built them on top of PowerShell, and you've got some great new tools for managing Active Directory. By the way, something else that we have now, that it's one of those things that you kind of wonder why we didn't have it before. How many of you have ever tried to, well, not tried, how many of you have ever deleted something in Active Directory and then immediately wished you hadn't? So what do? You just have to recreate it, right? Or get by without it or something, or do a backup or whatever. But now we actually have a recycle bin in Active Directory. So, huzzah, you can actually undelete something. Server Manager you can now install on your local client machine and set it up to configure all the servers that you have administrative rights to manage. So we've just done a lot of really good major new tools and also just minor tweaks as well to make our tool set easier for you. We also added something called File Classification Infrastructure, or FCI. FCI isn't really a feature. It's really, well, infrastructure, I guess, is the best word. It's the ability to add attributes on files beyond what's been there in the past, but more importantly, to set policies and manage your files based on some of those attributes. With FCI, you can do things like set files that will automatically expire and be deleted when they reach a certain date. You can set a backup program to automatically take any file with sensitive company information and move it to a particular location. You can generate reports based on particular attributes of a file. And what we've done with the product is we've built in the infrastructure that can be written to and taken advantage of programmatically. And now we're depending upon our ISVs to develop and extend their own tools to be able to take advantage of that. So you won't find a big tool set within Windows Server, but you will start to see that ISVs now start to release new versions of their management tools or new tools completely to write to that. And then finally, two of my favorite features, and I think Direct Access is probably my favorite feature ever to be added to Windows Server. Maybe with the exception of group policy, but no, I think it's probably my favorite. Stephen mentioned this earlier. Direct Access is the always on, always connected, it just works version of VPN, of RAS. How many of you VPN into your corporate network? Okay. How many of you enjoy the experience? Well, hands going up. Great. That's awesome if it's so smooth. I'll tell you what it's like for me.
Don't use Windows VPN. That's
Well, prior to Windows 7, this is what I had to do. I had to bring up a connection manager, little tool that would connect me. I had to type in my username and password. Typically, I would get it wrong the first time because I have a very long, complex password based on the requirements of my company. But it takes about 60 seconds for it to come back and tell me that I got it wrong so I could try it again. And then I would try it again. And then if it would let me in, then it would have to run a bunch of security checks. So it would quarantine me for a while it would do that. And then it would have to run some scripts. Typically, my antivirus signatures would be out of date, and so it would have to put those on. And then finally, I would get in, and it would take a good 4 to 5 minutes or so for me to connect up, which doesn't seem like a long time. But the moment when you connect up to your network is not the time when you want all that stuff to be coming down and applied to your machine. You've got something you need. You're on the road, I'm in a hotel, I'm in an airport, I only have a couple of minutes. I don't want to spend that time. So I'll tell you what I did over time. I don't know if you ever had this happen with you or your users. I just stopped connecting. I would just learn to live without it. And so I'd use Outlook Web Access, or I'd use RPC over HTTP, or I would have my colleagues email me files so I didn't have to connect up and get them. And then what happened is I'd fall even further out of compliance. And so when I did finally have to connect up to the network, I'd be stuck and I wouldn't be able to connect, and I'd have to get on with help desk, and it would just be a pain, and it made life hard for me, and it made life hard for the help desk. So the great thing about Direct Access is that